The divorce papers lay between us on the glass table. My wife, Elena Carter, sat across from me in her expensive black suit. She looked exactly like the woman the entire business world feared. CEO of Carter International. The woman who could fire 100 employees before lunch. The woman who had built a billion-dollar empire with her father. And my wife. At least, she had been my wife for the past 5 years. She looked at the papers and smiled. You finally signed them. I looked down at my signature. Yes. Elena leaned back in her chair. I honestly thought you would beg me not to do this. I almost laughed. 5 years ago, I had begged her to give her marriage a chance. 3 years ago, I had begged her to stop letting her ex, Ryan Mitchell, interfere in our relationship. 1 year ago, I had begged her to remember that I was still her husband. Today, I had nothing left to beg for. You wanted the divorce, I said quietly. Now you have it. Her smile became even more confident. Ryan and I have known each other since childhood. We were always meant to be together. I looked at her. Then why did you marry me? For the first time, her expression changed. Only for a second. Then she looked away. Things were complicated. No, things had never been complicated. She simply had never loved me. I had been the man she married because her family needed a stable alliance. The man who stood beside her at business dinners. The man who covered for her whenever she disappeared with Ryan. The man who stayed silent while the entire city whispered that her marriage was nothing but a contract. But today I was done. Elena picked up the divorce papers. You don't have to worry about the house, she said. You can keep your personal belongings. I stared at her. The house. Yes, the house belongs to my family. I nodded. And the company? She gave me a strange look. Obviously, Carter International belongs to me. I smiled faintly. Of course it does. She didn't understand why I was smiling. Neither did Ryan, who entered the room a few moments later. He walked directly toward Elena. She stood up and hugged him, right in front of me. Everything is finally over, Ryan said. Elena glanced at me. Yes, everything. Ryan looked at the papers. You actually signed? I did. He smiled. Then congratulations, Elena. You're finally free. I stood up. Congratulations. Both of them looked at me. Elena frowned. What are you congratulating us for? I adjusted my jacket. Your freedom. Then I walked out. Neither of them knew that the moment I signed those papers, I had also ended the protection I had given her family for 5 years. They didn't know that Carter International had survived its biggest crisis because of decisions I had made behind the scenes. They didn't know that the house they thought belonged to Elena was not actually hers. And they definitely didn't know that the man they had just divorced was the majority shareholder of the company they thought they owned. As I walked out of the building, my phone rang. Mr. Anderson, my lawyer said, the transfer is complete. I looked back at the skyscraper. Good. Should we proceed with the board meeting? I smiled. Yes. Tomorrow morning? No. I looked at the divorce papers in my hand. Tonight. Because Elena had chosen her ex during our divorce. Tomorrow, she would discover what she had truly lost. The next morning, Elena woke up believing she had finally won. She had spent 5 years trapped in a marriage she never wanted. At least, that was what she told herself. Ryan was in her penthouse when she woke up. He was standing near the window, holding 2 cups of coffee. Good morning, he said. Elena smiled. For the first time in years, she felt free. No husband, no marriage, no responsibility, no Daniel. She looked at the empty side of the bedroom. Daniel had already taken his things. Or so she thought. Did he really leave? Ryan asked. Elena nodded. He signed everything. Ryan smiled. Then you can finally focus on us. Elena walked toward him. But something felt strange. Daniel had never fought the divorce. He had never shouted. He had never asked for money. He had never demanded the house. He had simply signed. That bothered her. At the Carter International headquarters, Elena arrived at 9 o'clock. The moment she stepped into the lobby, she noticed something unusual. People were whispering. Her assistant rushed toward her. Mrs. Carter. Elena stopped her. Don't call me that anymore. The assistant hesitated. Ms. Carter, there's an emergency board meeting. Elena frowned. Who called it? The assistant swallowed. Mr. Anderson. Elena froze. Daniel? Yes. She immediately walked toward the executive floor. The boardroom was already full. Every major shareholder was sitting at the table, and at the head of the room was Daniel, her ex-husband. He was wearing a dark suit, calm, confident, completely different from the man she had known. Elena stared at him. "What are you doing here?" Daniel looked at her. "Good morning, Elena." She turned to the board members. "Why is he sitting in my chair?" No one answered. Then the chairman of the board stood up. "Because that chair belongs to him." Elena's face went pale. "What?" The chairman placed a document on the table. "Mr. Daniel Anderson is now the largest shareholder of Carter International." Elena stared at the papers. "That's impossible." Daniel leaned back. "Is it?" She looked at him. "You don't have that kind of money." For the first time, Daniel smiled. "You never asked." Silence filled the room. Elena suddenly remembered every time Daniel had advised her about the company. Every time he had warned her about risky investments. Every time he had told her not to trust certain executives. She had ignored him because she thought he was just her husband, a man who had no power of his own. But the truth was different. Daniel had built his own investment company years before meeting Elena. He had secretly purchased shares in Carter International during its financial crisis. And when the company nearly collapsed, he had saved it. But he never told her, because he wanted her to love him for who he was, not for his money. Unfortunately, she never did. Elena's hands trembled. "You planned this?" Daniel shook his head. "No." "Then why?" He looked directly at her. "Because you wanted a divorce." The room became silent. "You said you wanted to be free," he continued. "So I freed you." Elena stared at him. For the first time in 5 years, she had no idea who her husband really was. Elena refused to believe it. She spent the entire day investigating Daniel. By evening, she had discovered the truth. Daniel Anderson was not poor. He was not ordinary. He was the founder of Anderson Capital, one of the fastest-growing investment firms in the country. He had hidden his identity from everyone, including her. His company had quietly purchased shares in Carter International over the past 4 years. Not enough to control the company. Until now. Elena immediately went to his office. She found him reviewing documents. "You lied to me," she said. Daniel didn't even look up. "No, you hid everything from me." "That is not the same thing." "You were rich." "Yes." "You own an investment company." "Yes." "You were powerful enough to control my company." Daniel finally looked up. "I never wanted to control your company." "Then why did you buy the shares?" "Because your company was collapsing." Elena went silent. Daniel stood up. "Do you remember the crisis 3 years ago?" She did. Carter International had nearly lost a major international contract. The company had been close to bankruptcy. At that time, Daniel had suggested a strategy. Elena had ignored him. 2 weeks later, an anonymous investor had saved the company. She had always believed her father had found the money. But now she understood. It had been Daniel. "You saved us," she whispered. Daniel said nothing. "You saved the company." "I protected my wife." Elena looked away. "Why didn't you tell me?" Daniel gave her a tired smile. "Because I wanted one thing from you that money couldn't buy." "What?" "Your love." Elena's face changed. For the first time, she had no answer. Daniel continued. "You were always comparing me to Ryan." She looked down. "You always said Ryan understood you better." "I was wrong." "No," Daniel said. "You were honest." That hurt more than anger. Elena had spent years believing Daniel was lucky to have her. Now she realized she had been the lucky one, and she had thrown it away. "Can we fix this?" she asked quietly. Daniel looked at her. "You chose divorce." "I was confused." "No, you were certain." Her eyes became wet. "Daniel." He walked past her. "Don't worry. I won't interfere in your new life." She turned around. "Ryan isn't my new life." Daniel stopped. "But you chose him." And then he left. Elena remained alone in the office. For the first time, she understood the real cost of her decision. She had not simply lost a husband. She had lost the one person who had protected her without asking for anything in return. Elena went home that night with one thought in her mind. She needed to talk to Ryan. She found him in the penthouse. He was sitting on the sofa, drinking expensive wine. "Where were you?" he asked. "At the company." Ryan frowned. "Why?" Elena looked at him. "Did you know Daniel owned Anderson Capital?" Ryan froze. Only for a second, but Elena noticed. "You knew." Ryan placed his glass down. I heard rumors. Why didn't you tell me? Because it didn't matter. Elena stared at him. Didn't matter? Ryan stood up. Your divorce is final. Why are you still talking about him? Because he owns most of my company. Ryan's expression changed. Then he laughed. You're exaggerating. I'm not. Ryan's face became cold. Then take the company back. Ow! You're the CEO. Elena shook her head. Not anymore. Ryan suddenly became angry. What do you mean, not anymore? I still run the company, but the board... She stopped. Ryan's eyes narrowed. Daniel is trying to take everything from you. No, Elena said. He isn't. He just divorced you and took control of your company. He didn't take anything. Ryan stepped closer. You're defending it? Elena stared at him. For the first time, she saw something she had never noticed before. Ryan had always wanted her, but perhaps he had never wanted her heart. Perhaps he had wanted her name, her company, her lifestyle, her power. The next morning, the truth became clear. Ryan had secretly transferred millions of dollars from one of Carter International's subsidiaries. The money had gone into a private account. His account. When Elena confronted him, he didn't deny it. You were going to leave me anyway, he said. You stole from my company. I invested in our future. Our future? Ryan laughed. Your company was mine the moment we got together. Elena stepped back. She suddenly remembered every time Ryan had asked her to sign documents. Every time he had encouraged her to trust certain people. Every time Daniel had warned her. Daniel had been right. Ryan had been manipulating her, and she had called it love. You never loved me, Elena whispered. Ryan smiled bitterly. Love doesn't pay bills. That was the moment Elena understood. She had lost Daniel for a man who had never loved her. Elena returned to the mansion the next day. She had lived there for 5 years. Every room held memories. The dining room, where she and Daniel had eaten their first anniversary dinner. The garden where he had once waited for her in the rain. The bedroom where he had slept alone while she stayed out with Ryan. She walked inside, but before she could go upstairs, a lawyer entered. Ms. Carter. Elena frowned. Who are you? I represent Mr. Anderson. Her heart sank. What does he want? The lawyer handed her a document. This property must be vacated within 30 days. Elena stared at the paper. This is my house. The lawyer shook his head. No, ma'am. She looked at him. What? This property was purchased by Mr. Anderson before your marriage. Elena's face went pale. She remembered the house. When she moved in, Daniel had told her it was a wedding gift. She had laughed. She had said the house was too small. She had demanded a larger mansion. Daniel had bought this one anyway, and she had never asked whose name was on the documents. Now she knew. Everything was in Daniel's name. The house, the cars, the private investments, even the art collection she had considered hers. She had never cared enough to ask. Now she had to leave. That evening, Elena packed her belongings. She opened the closet. Half of it was still filled with Daniel's old clothes. She had never noticed how much space they occupied. Or perhaps she had simply never cared. She found an old box. Inside was a photograph. Her and Daniel. 5 years earlier. They were smiling. She remembered that day. Daniel had been nervous. She had been bored. He had held her hand. She had been looking at her phone. Elena sat on the floor. For the first time, she cried. Not because she had lost the mansion. Not because she had lost the company. She cried because she finally understood. She had lost the man who had given her everything, and she had never even looked closely enough to see it. The board meeting began at 10 in the morning. Elena entered the room expecting to regain control. Instead, every director was already seated. Daniel sat at the head of the table. The chairman stood. Ms. Carter, we need to discuss your position as CEO. Elena froze. My position? The chairman placed several documents on the table. Financial irregularities. Elena looked at the papers. These transactions were made by Ryan. Daniel remained silent. Elena looked at him. You knew. I knew. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to discover the truth yourself. She stared at him. You let me believe he was innocent. Daniel's voice was calm. I warned you. And he had. Many times. But she had never listened. The board voted. Elena was removed as CEO. The room became silent. She looked around. These people had worked with her for years. Yet no one stood up for her. Because they had already chosen Daniel. Not because he was richer, because he had saved the company, because he understood the business, because he had been the invisible force behind its success. Elena stood. You planned this. Daniel looked at her. No. Then why does it feel like everything is disappearing? Daniel's expression softened. Because you're finally seeing what was always there. She stared at him. The meeting ended. Elena walked out of the building. For the first time in her life, she had no title, no company, no mansion, no husband, and no Ryan. Her phone rang. It was Ryan. She answered. What do you want? I need money. Elena laughed bitterly. You stole money from my company. Your company? She closed her eyes. It isn't mine anymore. Ryan became silent. Then he hung up. That was when Elena realized. Ryan had already left, the moment her power disappeared. And Daniel? He had stayed, even after she divorced him. But she had been too blind to see the difference. 6 months passed. Daniel transformed Carter International. The company became stronger than ever. New investments came in. International partnerships were signed. The stock price reached an all-time high, and Daniel became one of the most powerful businessmen in the country. Elena watched everything from a small apartment. She had found a job, not as a CEO, not as a billionaire's wife, as an ordinary employee. For the first time in her life, she had to work for herself, and every day reminded her of Daniel. One evening, she received an invitation. Daniel was hosting a charity gala. Elena almost threw it away, but she went. When she entered the ballroom, everyone turned to look. Daniel was standing near the stage. He looked different, more confident, more powerful, and completely unreachable. Beside him stood a beautiful woman. Her name was Sophia. She was a respected businesswoman, and Daniel was smiling at her. Elena felt something break inside her. She walked toward them. Daniel noticed her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he said, Hello, Elena. She smiled nervously. Congratulations. Thank you. Her eyes moved toward Sophia. Your partner? Daniel nodded. My fiancé. Elena's heart stopped. She had known this day might come. But knowing something and experiencing it were two different things. I'm happy for you, she whispered. Daniel looked at her carefully. Are you? Elena forced a smile. Yes, but her eyes filled with tears. Daniel saw them, and for one brief moment, his expression softened. Elena whispered, Do you love her? Daniel looked at Sophia. Yes. That single word destroyed the last hope she had been holding on to. Elena lowered her head. Did you ever love me? Daniel was silent for a long time. Then he answered, Yes. Her eyes filled with tears. Then why didn't you fight for me? Daniel looked at her. Because I did. Elena froze. I fought for you every day, he continued. You just never noticed. She had no answer. Daniel walked away, and Elena finally understood the cruelest truth. She had not lost Daniel when he signed the divorce papers. She had lost him years ago. The divorce only made it official. 1 year after the divorce, Daniel and Sophia got married. The wedding was elegant, private, beautiful, and Elena watched it from a distance. She did not attend. She did not send flowers. She simply sat alone in her apartment and looked at an old photograph. The photograph of her and Daniel. The man she had once had. The man she had chosen to lose. That same day, Elena received a letter. It was from Daniel. She opened it with trembling hands. There was only one sentence. I hope you finally find the happiness you were looking for. Elena began to cry. Because she had found the truth. She had thought happiness was Ryan. She had thought power was everything. She had thought Daniel would always wait for her. She had believed that no matter what she did, he would remain hers. But people could leave, even the ones who loved you most. And sometimes, the person you hurt the most was the person who had loved you the best. Years later, Elena rebuilt her life. She started a small company. She worked hard. She became a better person. But she never married again. Whenever someone asked why, she simply smiled. Because some people only come into your life once. And when you lose them, you can spend the rest of your life becoming a better person. But you can never go back to the moment before you destroyed everything. Daniel never returned to her. He never regretted the divorce. He never looked back. He built a new life. A peaceful one. A happy one. And Elena? She finally understood what she had lost. She had lost the company. She had lost the house. She had lost the man who had protected her. But the greatest thing she lost was the chance to be loved by him again. Because during their divorce, Elena chose her ex. And in the end, she lost everything. The company, the house, the money, and most importantly, Daniel, the one man she thought would never leave. Sometimes, losing someone is not the punishment. Sometimes, the punishment is realizing that they were the best thing you ever had after they were already gone.